Welcome to the Resource on Reading today. We're going to be reading a story, but first up we're going to be doing daily devotions with Daniel, and then we're going to be reading the Bible, and then we're going to be doing stuff with Kimberly, and then we're going to be reading Fellowship of the Ring. I hope you guys enjoy. Make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and bell not miss the video. Here is my brother to do daily devotions with Daniel.
This is Banana Man. Okay,
That was the other one.
Toy Soldiers, June 1st. Be strong in the Lord and the power of his might. Visitors enter a war zone when they tour the Connecticut Valley Historical Museum. The museum is home to the largest display of toy soldiers in the world, arranged in dramatic scenes to tell the history of the war in miniature. 20 different world battles from ancient Egypt to World War II are reenacted using detailed, individually sculpted figures. The exhibit reminds us that the history of the world has repeatedly been determined by wars and their outcomes. We enter a war zone when we begin the Christian life. But we aren't toy soldiers, and our battles aren't miniaturized. According to Scripture, we struggle against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. Ephesians 6:12. We're to be fully aware that temptation is lurking behind every bush. Demons are opposing our every step, and our flesh is continually making treasonous overtures, trying to undercut our spiritual progress. We're more apt to be victorious when we realize we're at war. Hi, Becca.
That's not in the devotion.
How do you know?
Our temptations can be turned into stepping stones, leading to nobility by character. By divine grace, all of us can be victors. Herbert Lockyer.
It's time for Bible time!
Hello! Time for Bible time. Oh gosh, no, that's just horrifying. He's missing a foot.
Hi. Penguin went for a little flight. You thought that penguins were flightless birds? This one went for a flight. All right. We are on 1 Samuel chapter 22. And this is the English Standard Version, and we're late getting started, so let me begin. David departed from there and escaped to the cave of Adullam, and when his brothers and all his father's house heard it, they went down there to him. I think this isn't on me. Sorry. And everyone who was in distress, and everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was bitter in soul gathered to him, and he became commander over them, and there were with him about 400 men. And David went from there to Mizpah of Moab, and he said to the king of Moab, "Please let my father and my mother stay with you till I know what God will do for me." And he left them with the king of Moab, and they stayed with him all that time that David was in the stronghold. Then the prophet Gad said to David, "Do not remain in the stronghold. Depart and go into the land of Judah." So David departed and went into the forest of Horeb.
Harris.
What? Oh, it does say Hareth. Sorry, it was on a curve on the... So, Hareth. Now Saul heard that David was discovered, and the men who were with him. Saul was sitting at Gibeah under the tamarisk tree on the height with his spear in his hand, and all his servants were standing about him. And Saul said to his servants who stood about him, Hear now, people of Benjamin, will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards, and he make you all commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds, that all of you have conspired against me. No one discloses to me when my son makes a covenant with the son of Jesse. None of you is sorry for me, or discloses to me that my son has stirred up my servant against me, to lie in wait, as at this day. Then answered Doeg the Edomite, who stood by the servants of Saul, I saw the son of Jesse coming to Nob, to Ahimelech the son of Ahitub. And he inquired of the Lord for him, and gave him provisions, and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine. Then the king sent to summon Ahimelech the priest, the son of Ahitub, and all his father's house, the priests who were at Nob, and all of them came to the king. And Saul said, Hear now, son of Ahitub. And he answered, Here I am, my lord. And Saul said to him, Why have you conspired against me, you and the son of Jesse, in that you have given him bread and a sword, and have inquired of God for him, so that he has risen against me to lie in wait, as at this day? Then Ahimelech answered the king, And who among all your servants is so faithful as David? Who is the king's son-in-law and captain over your bodyguard, and honored in your house? Is today the first time that I have inquired of God for him? No, let not the king impute anything to his servant, or to all the house of my father, for your servant has known nothing of all this, much or little. And the king said, You shall surely die, Ahimelech, you and all your father's house. And the king said to the guard who stood about him, Turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because their hand also is with David. And they knew that he fled, and did not disclose it to me. But the servants of the king would not put out their hand to strike the priests of the Lord. Then the king said to Doeg, You turn and strike the priests. And Doeg the Edomite turned and struck down the priests, and he killed on that day 85 persons who wore the linen ephod. And Nob, the city of the priests, he put to the sword, both man and woman, child and infant, ox, donkey, and sheep he put to the sword. But one of the sons of Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled after David. And Abiathar told David that Saul had killed the priests of the Lord. And David said to Abiathar, I knew on that day when Doeg the Edomite was there, that he would surely tell Saul, I have occasioned the death of all the persons of your father's house. Stay with me, do not be afraid, for he who seeks my life seeks your life. With me you shall be in safekeeping. That is the end of chapter 22. Not a very happy chapter, but nonetheless, 85 priests put to the sword.
Their families.
And their families. All right, so in the last chapter, they're leaving Lothlorien, and they decide to give them some gifts. For Legolas, they give him a spider, and for Aragorn, they give him a souvenir hat, and for Frodo, they give him a comfy pair of pajamas, and for Sam, they give him some dirt, which is actually the only true one that I've said so far. And for Gimli, the mistress asked what he wanted, and he said, I want only one thing. I want you to chop off all your hair and give it to me right now, because that's the kind of dwarf I am. And she said, no.
Dad?
So, Now Kimberly's gonna come and tell how it really happened.
You're
You silly.
silly, Daddy.
At least I didn't kill anybody this time. I did give Legolas a spider, though.
Spider that turned him into Spider-Man.
So weird.
Oh my gosh, Daddy. Okay, they gave Legolas a new bow. They gave, I think they gave one of the hobbits, a rope.
That was Sam.
Yeah, they gave Sam a rope. Cause,
Remember Sam from the very beginning? He like wished that he had brought
Yeah.
a rose.
he was like,
What
you
is
know,
going on over
I
here?
should have brought a rope because now we need a rope and we don't have one. So, then what happened was they gave, I keep forgetting what they gave everyone else, but they did not, well, Gimli did not ask for all her hair. He asked for a few pieces of her hair, and she gave him 3 strands. And if he said that if he ever got home to his mountain, that he would cast it in crystal and pass it down as an heirloom.
What did they give to everybody? The
Ships.
jackets?
Yeah, they gave him these
The
cloaks.
cloaks, that's right.
And boats.
And it's not ships, right? It's like,
Spaceship.
I think it's like canoes.
They're like giant, big spaceships that
Nope, not that.
fly
That is a
through the
different
sky.
boat. That is not what they gave me.
Giant spaceships that fly through the sky.
Hey, alright, let's stop being silly.
Okay.
Okay, but I'm going to hand it off to Dad, who thankfully did not kill them this time.
The Spider-Man killed everyone, but
Hi. So I've got the story right here. The other thing that they gave him was lembas bread, which is much better than cram, apparently, whatever cram is. But, all right, yeah, not good provisions. Where did Kimberly go? She's grabbing a pencil. All right, so this is chapter 9, The Great River. Is Rebecca still there? Hi, Rebecca. I'm so glad you're there. All right, the Great River. Frodo was roused by Sam. He found that he was lying well wrapped under tall gray-skinned trees in a quiet corner of the woodlands on the west bank of the great river Anduin. He had slept the night away, and the gray of morning was dim among the bare branches. Gimli was busy with a small fire near at hand. They started again before the day was broad. Not that most of the company was eager to hurry southward. They were content that the decision which they must make at the latest when they came to Rorus and the Tendrock Isle still lay some days ahead, and they let the river bear them on at its own pace, having no desire to hasten towards the perils that lay beyond, whichever course they took in the end. Aragorn let them drift with the stream as they wished, husbanding their strength against weariness to come, but he insisted that at least they should start early each day and journey on far into the evening, for he felt in his heart that time was pressing, and he feared that the Dark Lord had not been idle while they lingered on in Lorien. Nonetheless, they saw no sign of an enemy that day nor the next. The dull gray hours passed without event. As the third day of their voyage wore on, the lands changed slowly. The trees thinned and then failed altogether. On the eastern bank, to their left, they saw long, formless slopes stretching up and away toward the sky. Brown and withered they looked, as if fire had passed over them, leaving no living blade of green, an unfriendly waste without even a broken tree or a bold stone to relieve the emptiness. They had come to the brown lands that lay west and desolate between southern Mirkwood and the hills of the Emyn Muil. What pestilence or war or evil deed of the enemy had so blasted all that region, even Aragorn could not tell. Upon the west to their right the land was treeless also, but it was flat, and in many places green with white plains of grass. On this side of the river they passed forests of great reeds, so tall that they shut out all view to the west, and little boats went rustling by along their fluttering borders. Their dark withered plumes bent and tossed in the light, cold airs hissing softly and sadly. Here and there, through openings, Frodo could catch sudden glimpses of rolling meads, and far beyond them hills in the sunset, and away on the edge of sight a dark line where marched the southernmost ranks of the Misty Mountains. There was no sign of living, moving things save birds. Of these there were many, small fowl whistling and piping in the reeds, but they were seldom seen. Once or twice the travelers heard the rush and whine of swan wings, and looking up they saw a great phalanx streaming along the sky. "Swans," said Sam, "and mighty big ones too." "Yes," said Aragorn, "and they are black swans." "How wide and empty and mournful all this country looks," said Frodo. "I always imagined that as one journeyed south it got warmer and merrier until winter was left behind forever." "But we have not journeyed far south yet," answered Aragorn. "It is still winter, and we are far from the sea. Here the world is cold until the sudden spring, and we may yet have snow again. Far away down in the Bay of Belfalas, to which Anduin runs, it is warm and merry, maybe, or would be but for the enemy. But here we are not above 60 leagues, I guess, south of the South Farthing, away in your shire, hundreds of long miles yonder. You are looking now southwest across the north plains of the Riddermark, Rohan, the land of the horse lords. Ere long we shall come to the mouth of the Limelight that runs down from Fangorn to join the great river. That is the north boundary of Rohan, and of old all that lay between Limelight and the White Mountains belonged to the Rohirrim. It is a rich and pleasant land, and its grass has no rival. But in these evil days folks do not dwell by the river or ride often to its shores. Anduin is wide, yet the orcs can shoot their arrows far across the stream. And of late it is said they have dared to cross the water and raid the herds and studs of Rohan. Sam looked from bank to bank uneasily. The trees had seemed hostile before, as if they harbored secret eyes and lurking dangers. Now he wished that the trees were still there. He felt that the company was too naked, afloat in little open boats, in the midst of the shelterless lands, and on a river that was the frontier of war. In the next day or two, as they went on, borne steadily southward, this feeling of insecurity grew on all the company. For a whole day they took to their paddles and hastened forward. The banks slid by. Soon the river broadened and grew more shallow. Long stony beaches lay upon the east, and there were gravel shoals in the water, so that the careful steering was needed. The brown lands rose into bleak wolds, over which flowed a chill air from the east. On the other side, the meads had become rolling downs of withered grass amidst a land of fen and tussock. Frodo shivered, thinking of the lawns and fountains, the clear sun and gentle rains of Lothlorien. There was little speech and no laughter in any of the boats. Each member of the company was busy with his own thoughts. The heart of Legolas was running under the stars of a summer night in some northern glade amid the beech woods. Gimli was fingering gold in his mind and wondering if it were fit to be wrought into the housing of the lady's gift. Merry and Pippin in the middle boat were ill at ease, for Boromir sat muttering to himself, sometimes biting his nails, as if some restlessness or doubt consumed him, sometimes seizing a paddle and driving the boat close behind Aragorn's. Then Pippin, who sat in the bow, looking back, caught a queer gleam in his eye as he peered forward, gazing at Frodo. Sam had long ago made up his mind that though boats were maybe not as dangerous as he had been brought up to believe, they were far more uncomfortable than even he had imagined. He was cramped and miserable, having nothing to do but stare at the winter lands crawling by and the gray water on either side of him. Even when the paddles were in use, they did not trust Sam with one. As dusk drew down on the fourth day, he was looking back over the bowed heads of Frodo and Aragorn and the following boats. He was drowsy and longed for camp and the feel of earth under his toes. Suddenly something caught his sight. At first he stared at it listlessly. Then he sat up and rubbed his eyes, but when he looked again, he could not see it any more. That night they camped on a small eyot close to the western bank. Sam lay rolled in blankets beside Frodo. "I had a funny dream an hour or two before we stopped, Mr. Frodo," he said. "Or maybe it wasn't a dream. Funny it was, anyway." "Well, what was it?" said Frodo, knowing that Sam would not settle down until he had told his tale, whatever it was. "I haven't seen or thought of anything to make me smile since we left Lothlorien." "It wasn't funny that way, Mr. Frodo. It was queer, all wrong, as if it wasn't a dream, and you had best hear it. It was like this. I saw a log with eyes." "The log's all right," said Frodo. "There are many in the river, but leave out the eyes." "That I won't," said Sam. "'Twas the eyes as made me sit up, so to speak. I saw what I took to be a log floating along in the half-light behind Gimli's boat, but I didn't give much heed to it. Then it seemed as if the log was slowly catching us up, and that was peculiar, as you might say, seeing as we were all floating on the stream together. Just then I saw the eyes, two pale sort of points, shiny like, on a hump at the near end of the log. What's more, it wasn't a log, for it had a paddle feet, like a swan's almost, only they seemed bigger, and kept dipping in and out of the water. That's when I sat right up and rubbed my eyes, meaning to give a shout if it was still there, when I had rubbed the drowse out of my head, for the whatever it was coming along fast now and getting close behind Gimli. But whether those two lamps spotted me moving and staring, or whether I came to my senses, I don't know. When I looked again, it wasn't there. Yet I think I caught a glimpse with the tail of my eye, as the saying is, of something dark shooting under the shadow of the bank. I couldn't see no more eyes, though. I said to myself, "Dreaming again, Sam Gamgee," I said, and I said no more just then. But I've been thinking since, and now I'm not so sure. What do you make of it, Mr. Frodo? "I should make nothing of it but a log and the dusk and sleep in your eyes, Sam," said Frodo, "if this was the first time that those eyes had been seen. But it isn't. I saw them away back north before we reached Lorien, and I saw a strange creature with eyes climbing to the flet that night. Haldir saw it too, and do you remember the report of the elves that went after the orc band?" "Ah," said Sam, "I do. And I remember more too. I don't like my thoughts, but thinking of one thing and another, and Mr. Bilbo's stories and all, I fancy I should put a name on the creature as a guess. A nasty name. Gollum, maybe?" "Yes, that is what I have feared for some time," said Frodo, "ever since the night on the Flet. I suppose he was lurking in Moria, and picking up our trail then, but I hoped that our way in Lorien would throw him off the scent again." The miserable creature must have been hiding in the woods by the silver lode, watching us start off. That's about it, said Sam, and we'd better be a bit more watchful ourselves, or we'll feel some nasty fingers around our necks one of those nights, if we ever wake up to feel anything. And that's what I was leading up to. No need to trouble Strider or the others tonight. I'll keep watch. I can sleep tomorrow, being no more than luggage in the boat, as you might say. I might, said Frodo, and I might say luggage with eyes. You shall watch, but only if you promise to wake me halfway toward morning, if nothing happens before then. In the dead hours, Frodo came out of a deep, dark sleep to find Sam shaking him. It's a shame to wake you, whispered Sam, but that's what you said. There's nothing to tell, or not much. I thought I heard some soft plashing and a sniffing noise a while back, but you hear a lot of such queer sounds by a river at night. He lay down, and Frodo sat up, huddled in his blankets, and fought off his sleep. Minutes or hours passed slowly, and nothing happened. Frodo was just yielding to the temptation to lie down again, when a dark shape, hardly visible, floated close to one of the moored boats. A long, whitish hand could be dimly seen as it shot out and grabbed the gunwale. Two pale, lamp-like eyes shone coldly as they peered inside, and then they lifted and gazed up at Frodo on the yacht. They were not more than a yard or two away, and Frodo heard the soft hiss of intaken breath. He stood up, drawing Sting from its sheath, and faced the eyes. Immediately their light was shut off. There was another hiss and a splash, and the dark log shape shot away downstream into the night. Aragorn stirred in his sleep, turning over, and sat up. "What is it?" he whispered, springing up and coming to Frodo. "I felt something in my sleep. Why have you drawn your sword?" "Gollum," answered Frodo, "or at least, so I guess." "Ah," said Aragorn, "so you know about our little footpad, do you? He padded after us through Moria and right down to Nimrodel. Since we took to boats, he has been lying on a log and paddling with hands and feet. I have tried to catch him once or twice at night, but he is slyer than a fox and as slippery as a fish. I hoped the river voyage would beat him, but he is too clever a waterman. We shall have to try going faster tomorrow. You lie down now, and I will keep watch for what is left of the night. I wish I could lay my hands on the wretch. We might make him useful, but I cannot. We shall have to try and lose him. He is very dangerous, quite apart from murder by night on his own account. He may put an enemy that is about on our track." The night passed without Gollum showing so much as a shadow again. After that, the company kept a sharp lookout, but they saw no more of Gollum while the voyage lasted. If he was still following, he was very wary and cunning. At Aragorn's bidding, they paddled now for long spells, and the banks went swiftly by, but they saw little of the country, for they journeyed mostly by night and twilight, resting by day and lying as hidden as the land allowed. In this way the time passed without event until the 7th day. The weather was still grey and overcast, and with wind from the east, but as evening drew into night, the sky away westward cleared, and pools of faint light, yellow and pale green, opened under the grey shores of cloud. There the white rind of the new moon could be seen glimmering in the remote lakes. Sam looked at it and puckered his brows. The next day the country on either side began to change rapidly. The banks began to rise and grow stony. Soon they were passing through a hilly, rocky land, and on both shores there were there were steep slopes buried in deep breaks of thorn and sloe, tangled with brambles and creepers. Behind them stood low, crumbling cliffs and chimneys of gray, weathered stone, dark with ivy, and beyond these again there rose high ridges crowned with wind-writhen firs. They were drawing near to the gray hill country of the Emmanuel, the southern march of Wilderland. There were many birds about the cliffs and the rock chimneys, and all day, high in the air, flocks of birds had been circling, black against the pale sky. As they lay in their camp that day, Aragorn watched the flights doubtfully, wondering if Gollum had been doing some mischief, and the news of their voyage was now moving in the wilderness. Later, as the sun was setting and the company was stirring and getting ready to start again, he descried a dark spot against the fading light, a great bird high and far off, now wheeling, now flying on slowly southwards. "What is that, Legolas?" he asked, pointing to the northern sky. "Is it, as I think, an eagle?" "Yes," said Legolas, "it is an eagle, a hunting eagle. I wonder what that forebodes. It is far from the mountains." "We will not start until it is fully dark," said Aragorn. The 8th night of their journey came. It was silent and windless. The grey east wind had passed away. The thin crescent of the moon had fallen early into the pale sunset, but the sky was clear above, and though far away in the south there were great ranges of cloud that still shone faintly in the west, stars glinted bright. "Come," said Aragorn. "We will venture one more journey by night. We are coming to reaches of the river that I do not know well, for I have never journeyed by water in these parts before, not between here and the rapids of Sarn Gabir. But if I am right in my reckoning, those are still many miles ahead. Still, there are dangerous places even before we come there, rocks and stony eyots in the stream. We must keep a sharp watch and not try to paddle swiftly." To Sam, in the leading boat, was given the task of watchman. He lay forward, peering into the gloom. The night grew dark. The night grew dark, but the stars above were strangely bright, and if there was a glimmer on the face of the river, it was close on midnight, and they had been drifting for some while, hardly using the paddles, when suddenly Sam cried out. Only a few yards ahead, dark shapes loomed up in the stream, and he heard the swirl of racing water. There was a swift current which swung left toward the eastern shore where the channel was clear. As they were swept aside, the travelers could see, now very close, the pale foam of the river lashing against sharp rocks that were thrust out far into the stream like a ridge of teeth. The boats were still huddled together. "Ho there, Aragorn!" shouted Boromir as his boat bumped into the leader. "This is madness. We cannot dare the rapids by night, but no boat can live in Sarn Gabir, be it day or night." "Back, back!" cried Aragorn. Turn if you can." He drove his paddle into the water, trying to hold the boat and bring it around. "I am not out of my reckoning," he said to Frodo. I am out of my reckoning. I did not know that we had come so far. Anduin flows faster than I thought. Sarn Gabir must be close at hand already." With great efforts they checked the boats and slowly brought them about, but at first they could make only small leadway against the current, and all the time they were carried nearer and nearer to the eastern bank. Now dark and ominous it loomed up in the night. "All together, paddle!" shouted Boromir. "Paddle, or we shall be driven on the shoals." Even as he spoke, Frodo felt the keel beneath him grate upon stone. At that moment there was a twang of bowstrings. Several arrows whistled over them, and some fell among them. One smote Frodo between the shoulders, and he lurched forward with a cry, letting go his paddle. But the arrow fell back, foiled by his hidden coat of mail. Another passed through Aragorn's hood, and a third stood fast in the gunwale of the second boat, close by Merry's hand. Sam thought he could glimpse black figures running to and fro upon the long shingle banks that lay under the eastern shore. They seemed very near. "Yerk!" said Legolas, falling into his own tongue. "Orcs!" cried Gimli. "Gollum's doing, I'll bound," said Sam to Frodo, "and a nice place to choose, too. The river seems set on taking us right into their arms." They all leaned forward, straining at the paddles. Even Sam took a hand. Every moment they expected to feel the bite of black feathered arrows. Many whined overhead or struck the water nearby, but there were no more hits. It was dark, but not too dark for the night eyes of orcs, and in the star glimmer they must have offered their cunning foes some mark, unless it was that the grey cloaks of Lorien and the grey timber of the elf-wrought boats defeated the malice of the archers of Mordor. Stroke by stroke they labored on. In the darkness it was hard to be sure that they were indeed moving at all, but slowly the swirl of the water grew less, and the shadow of the eastern bank faded back into the night. At last, as far as they could judge, they had reached the middle of the stream again, and had driven their boats back some distance above the jutting rocks. Then, half turning, they thrust them with all their strength toward the western shore. Under the shadow of bushes, leaning out over the water, they halted and drew breath. Just 1 minute. I'm gonna try something because my eyes. Okay. And so archers of Mordor, stroke by stroke, drew breath. Okay. Legolas laid down his paddle and took up the bow that he had brought from Lorien. Then he sprang ashore and climbed a few paces up the bank. Stringing the bow and fitting an arrow, he turned, peering back over the river into the darkness. Across the water there were shrill cries, but nothing could be seen. Frodo looked up at the elf standing tall above him, and as he gazed into the night, seeking a mark to shoot at. His head was dark, crowned with sharp white stars that glistened in the black pools of the sky behind. But now, rising and sailing up from the south, the great clouds advanced, sending out dark outriders into the starry fields. A sudden dread fell upon the company. "Elbereth Githoniel," sighed Legolas as he looked up. Even as he did so, a dark shape, like a cloud and yet not a cloud, for it moved far more swiftly, came out of the blackness in the south and sped toward the company, blotting out all light as it approached. Soon it appeared as a great winged creature, blacker than the pits in the night. Fierce voices rose up to greet it from across the water. Frodo felt a sudden chill running through him and clutching at his heart. There was a deadly cold, like the memory of an old wound in his shoulder. He crouched down as if to hide. Suddenly the great bow of Lorien sang. Shrill went the arrow from the elfin string. Frodo looked up. Almost above him, the winged shape swerved. There was a harsh, croaking scream as it fell out of the air, vanishing down into the ground, into the gloom of the eastern shore. The sky was clean again. There was a tumult of many voices far away, cursing and wailing in the darkness, and then silence. Neither shaft nor cry came again from the east that night. After a while, Aragorn led the boats back upstream. They felt their way along the water's edge for some distance until they found a small, shallow bay. A few low trees grew there, close to the water, and behind them rose a steep, rocky bank. Here the company decided to stay and await the dawn. It was useless to attempt to move further by night. They made no camp and lit no fire, but lay huddled to the boats, moored close together. "Praised be the bow of Galadriel and the hand of the eye of Legolas," said Gimli as he munched a wafer of lembas. "That was a mighty shot in the dark, my friend." "But who can say what it hit?" said Legolas. "I cannot," said Gimli, "but I am glad that the shadow came no nearer. I liked it not at all. Too much it reminded me of the shadow in Moria, the shadow of the Balrog." He ended in a whisper. "It was not a Balrog," said Frodo, still shivering with the chill that had come upon him. "It was something colder. I think it was—" Then he paused and fell silent. "What do you think?" asked Boromir eagerly, leaning from his boat as if he was trying to catch a glimpse of Frodo's face. "I think— No, I will not say," answered Frodo. "Whatever it was, his fall has dismayed our enemies." "So it seems," said Aragorn. "Yet where they are, and how many, and what they will do next, we do not know. This night we must all be sleepless. Dark hides us now, but what the day will show, who can tell? Have your weapons close to hand." And this is a pause. I'm just going to check real fast, because I am having some issues. We're about halfway through this chapter. I'm having some visual issues right now. Yeah, I think this is probably a good place to stop. Sorry, I know it's probably not a great place to stop, but it is at least in between two sections. So I'm going to pause here, and I hope that everybody's having a good night, and maybe we'll be able to finish the rest of the story, because I know the last chapter is not very long. So maybe we'll be able to finish the rest of the story next time that we read, which will be either tomorrow or Thursday. So God bless you, have a good night, and we'll